We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Pentagon chief says he is not ready to call the crisis with Iran over yet.
Preventing Afghanistan from becoming a sanctuary again.
Guaido says there is no date to restart Venezuela's political crisis talks.
En todo el mundo y en Venezuela, relaciones multilaterales y cooperación.
Argentines protest Macri and demand a food emergency. Dorian brings heavy rain and strong winds to the U.S. Virgin Islands. The OAS Permanent Council approves a resolution condemning human rights violations in Venezuela.
Vote of 21 in favor.
Trump advisor Bolton stresses Ukraine's, quote, sovereignty over all its territories. Japan opens development talks with African leaders in an aid forum. Alleged victims of Epstein give testimony to a New York court. Russia seizes over 4,000 smuggled endangered tortoises. Plus, Aid to Humanity donates thousands to Oakland local organizations on National Nonprofit Day and gives free school supplies to students. This is Eagle News, broadcasting from Las Vegas, bringing you stories from around the globe. I'm Anna Klee. Top U.S. defense officials said Wednesday the Taliban must ensure that Afghanistan does not become a sanctuary for extremists as peace negotiations with the powerful insurgent group appear to be nearing their conclusion. Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who was confirmed as the Pentagon chief just 1 month ago, told reporters that talks with the Taliban in Qatar must guarantee that Afghanistan, quote, is no longer a safe haven for terrorists to attack the United States.
I think this administration is committed to finding a path forward that, again, achieves certainly a few things. One, of course, being that Afghanistan is no longer a safe haven for terrorists to attack the United States. And so that's good. I'm not sure I'm ready to call the crisis over yet, but so far so good. And we hope that trend lines continue that way. And we hope that the parties, that the Iranians would agree to meet and talk and help us resolve these issues. Your first question, Bob. We are not seeking conflict with Iran. We want to engage with them diplomatically. You saw over the weekend some reporting. The president once again said that he's more than willing to meet with Iran's leaders to resolve this diplomatically, and that was.
General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said a deal on drawing down the 13,000 U.S. troops in the country after fighting for nearly 2 decades to what many call a stalemate must not leave al-Qaeda, the Islamic State or ISIS group, and other U.S.-designated terror organizations space to continue their activities. Standing next to Esper, Dunford said, quote, I'm not using the withdrawal word right now. we're going to make sure that Afghanistan is not a sanctuary, and we're going to try to have an effort to bring peace and stability to Afghanistan. Danforth said it was clear that there needed to be a negotiated solution, and one that involved not just the United States, but the Afghan government. He said, quote, I view any agreement that would be pending as something we are doing with, not to, the Afghan people. What is needed is some type of disruption to the status quo. We want stability for the Afghan people. Amid concerns that Afghan government forces are not yet capable of confronting ISIS, which has mounted repeatedly deadly attacks against the military and civilians, Danforth declined to say whether the Pentagon was planning to keep some counter-terror operations active in the country over the years to come. He said any agreement is going to be, quote, conditions-based, and it was premature to talk about what our counter-terrorism presence in Afghanistan may or may not be.
I think any of us that have served there have long known that what's going to be required is a negotiated peace settlement, inter-Afghan dialogue leading to that peace settlement.
Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido admitted on Wednesday that talks with the government of President Nicolas Maduro aimed at resolving the country's political crisis, quote, aren't working. Talks mediated by Norway first took place in May in Oslo, with several subsequent rounds in Barbados. But Maduro called off the discussions 3 weeks ago in response to new U.S. sanctions against his government. The two sides are deadlocked, with Guaido, who sparked the crisis by declaring himself acting president in January, demanding Maduro's resignation, and the government insisting the United States lift sanctions that it blames for the country's crippled economy.
Así que, en este momento, no hay una fecha para reanudación del mecanismo de mediación del Reino de Noruega hasta que logremos que sea algo certero para aproximar a una solución.
Guaido said that if the government is using the talks simply to boost its image, quote, that serves no purpose for the Venezuelan people. Guaido supports the sanctions that target the regime, as he hopes they will put pressure on Maduro to step down and call new elections. The U.S., one of more than 50 countries to recognize Guaido as interim president, stepped up sanctions in April by targeting state oil company PDVSA, on whose revenues the country is almost entirely dependent. According to the United Nations, in addition to the political standoff, Venezuela is suffering one of the worst economic crises in its history, with a quarter of its 30 million population in need of aid. Thousands of Argentines took to the streets of Buenos Aires to protest against President Mauricio Macri's policies and to demand the government declares a food emergency in the country.
Sur. Estamos aquí haciendo una jornada de lucha, protestando para que el gobierno nacional dé respuesta a la urgencia que hay, a la crisis social que estamos viviendo en los barrios. Centralmente queremos un refuerzo urgente para los merenderos y comedores que se han extendido y han crecido enormemente por todo el conurbano y toda la provincia.
Que ponele, viene el hijo, viene la mamá y viene el abuelo. Antes ponele eran 50, ahora en merendero tenés 100 chicos, más contando la familia también, ¿no? Porque cada vez se va sumando más. La necesidad se ve en los merenderos, por eso...
Hurricane Dorian bore down Wednesday on the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, where residents braced for a direct hit, the first since the island was ravaged 2 years ago by Hurricane Maria. Police said even before the storm struck, an 80-year-old man was killed in a fall from a ladder while fixing a roof in a San Juan suburb. U.S. forecasters said Dorian was upgraded to a hurricane from a tropical storm near St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, just east of Puerto Rico. The latest path also puts Dorian on a trajectory to strike the Atlantic coast of Florida, which declared a state of emergency, or Georgia, by the weekend. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said Dorian is gradually moving away from the northeastern Caribbean Sea and, quote, is forecast to strengthen and become a powerful hurricane during the next few days over the Atlantic waters. Residents of the seaside town of Fajardo, hard hit by Maria in 2017 and now directly in Dorian's path, fueled their vehicles and stocked up on basic necessities. Roads were nearly empty, businesses were closed, and people sheltered in their homes. Dorian also developed into a political storm. President Donald Trump declared a state of emergency in Puerto Rico, authorizing federal assistance. Up next, the OAS Permanent Council approves a resolution condemning human rights violations in Venezuela. Trump advisor Bolton stresses Ukraine's, quote, sovereignty over all its territory. Japan opens development talks with African leaders in an aid forum. Alleged victims of Epstein give testimony to a New York court. Russia seizes over 4,000 smuggled endangered tortoises. These stories and more when Eagle News return. Stay with us. The Organization of American States passed a resolution Wednesday condemning, quote, grave and systematic human rights abuses in Venezuela, and demanded an independent investigation. The regional security body, which comprises every country in the Western Hemisphere but Cuba, passed the resolution by a 21-3 vote. 7 members abstained and 3 were absent for the vote.
With a vote of 21 in favor, 3 against, 7 abstentions, and 3 absent, the Permanent Council hereby declares that the draft resolution on the human rights situation in Venezuela contained in document CP/Doc 5549/19 is approved.
The resolution echoed charges of torture, extrajudicial killings, and forced disappearances made last month against Venezuela's leftist regime by UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet. If condemned, quote, the grave and systematic violations of human rights in Venezuela, including the use of torture, illegal and arbitrary detentions, extrajudicial executions, forced disappearances, and the denial of the most basic rights and necessities, especially those related to health, food, and education. It also called for, quote, an independent, exhaustive, and credible investigation to bring the perpetrators to justice, and demanded that Venezuela grant, quote, immediate and unhindered access to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The Commission, an autonomous body of the OAS, has been unable to visit Venezuela since 2002, during the presidency of Maduro's predecessor and mentor, the late Hugo Chavez. The U.S. Representative Alexis Ludwig said the vote was, quote, an important call to action.
With these points in mind, the resolution before us today represents an important call to action, as it demands a truly independent investigation into the egregious human rights violations and abuses committed by the former Maduro regime.
The resolution was presented by Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, the United States, Guatemala, Paraguay, and Peru. The United States has led an international effort to force the resignation of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro to clear the way for elections. But Maduro has so far managed to survive a challenge from U.S.-backed opposition leader Juan Guaido, a short-lived military uprising, and massive street protests. Under Maduro, the once rich oil producer has spiraled into a severe crisis that has driven millions of Venezuelans to leave the country. White House National Security Advisor John Bolton on Wednesday stressed U.S. commitment to Ukraine's territorial integrity during talks with the country's new president, part of a regional tour in Russia's traditional field of influence. The security advisor said he would travel on to Moldova and then to Belarus, becoming the highest-level U.S. representative in years to visit the repressive ex-Soviet nation. Bolton praised the productive talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and underlined the U.S. commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity during the talks with top Kiev officials, he told journalists during a briefing.
Had a chance to meet with a number of leaders of the new government here in Ukraine and had very productive talks. We talked about my expectation that President Zelensky and President Trump will have a chance to meet in Warsaw, and we're going to try and work out the arrangements for that in the next couple of days. Confronting us, and I underlined the strength of the continuing U.S. commitment to full Ukrainian sovereignty over all of its territory.
He also raised the prospect of Zelensky meeting U.S. President Donald Trump at an event in Warsaw this weekend to mark 80 years since the Nazi invasion of Poland. Bolton's visit came after French President Emmanuel Macron announced Monday that the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France would hold peace talks on the conflict in eastern Ukraine next month. Ukraine has been locked in conflict with Russia-backed separatists since Moscow annexed Crimea in 2014, a move the international community refuses to recognize. Some 13,000 people have been killed in the violence that Kiev blames on Russian President Vladimir Putin. Moscow has denied claims it has funneled troops and arms across the border. Japan hosts development talks with African leaders this week, looking to boost its presence on the continent and offer an alternative to investments by an increasingly assertive China. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said he wants the latest round of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TICAD, to help, quote, launch impactful Japanese action on the continent. The meeting, held around every 5 years since 1993 in Japan or an African country, comes against the backdrop of expanding investment in China, which announced $60 billion in development funding for Africa last year. That figure is twice as much as Japan pledged at the last Tokyo International Conference on African Development meeting in 2016. But analysts said Tokyo is unlikely to try to outpledge China at this year's talks. It will seek instead to position itself as a partner of quality, offering high-impact loans and other assistance without the sometimes controversial strings attached to money doled out by Beijing. Abe said recently Japan wants to drive Africa's growth, quote, with its high-quality infrastructure development, science technology, and innovation.
この3年、日本からアフリカへの民間投資が200億ドルに達しました。1世紀を超す歴史を持つ会社から新興企業まで、投資の主体には豊かなバリエーションがあり、皆アフリカに価値を求めています。
Sawaka Takazaki, Deputy Director of the Middle East and Africa Division at the Japan External Trade Organization, a government-backed trade promotion body, said TCAD is a good opportunity for Japan to send a message about, quote, its practical, well-planned lending.
I see Africa as a dynamic continent of opportunity, where winds of hope are blowing ever stronger. And TCAD has played a critical role in focusing international dialogue on Africa, built on the twin principles of African ownership and international partnership. Its partnerships have made important contribution to Africa's economic transformation through entrepreneurship and trade. And they have supported increased access to health services, education, water, and sanitation.
China's massive Belt and Road Initiative, which offers hundreds of billions of dollars in Chinese financing for massive infrastructure projects, has been eagerly embraced in many parts of Africa. But on the continent as well as elsewhere, it has been criticized for favoring Chinese companies and workers over local economies, saddling nations with debt and ignoring rights and environmental issues. Masahiko Kiya, a Japanese diplomat in charge of the conference, said many of the infrastructure projects in Africa, quote, could become quite a significant debt burden for some countries. Japan says it will offer more favorable financing without the exclusive rights agreements often baked into China's projects. Alleged victims leave court in New York after testifying about assaults by disgraced U.S. financier Jeffrey Epstein. A month after Epstein committed suicide in his New York jail cell, the victims say it was, quote, empowering to testify, but that his death gives nobody justice and leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
It was both empowering and infuriating to know that the person who I needed to hear those words is not here to hear them.
Jeffrey Epstein's death, whether it was a suicide or murder, does not end the case. Does not end their fight for justice. It does not end their feeling that they were manipulated and victimized and that they were child victims.
Officials said Russian border guards have seized more than 4,000 endangered wild tortoises after they were smuggled out of Kazakhstan. The Interior Ministry said Tuesday traffickers drove the 4,100 Central Asian tortoises, which are classed as globally vulnerable, across the border into Russia's Orenburg region in a trailer where they were disguised as cabbages. Their market value were estimated at 7.8 million rubles, or about $117,000. Investigators placed the reptiles under the care of a college in Orenburg, where students and staff fed them for a month. Sergei Ryadzov, who coordinated the rescue effort at Orenburg Pedagogical University, said, quote, "They were put into an old sports hall, and we had to feed them every other day for over a month while the paperwork was being prepared. They ate cabbage, squash, fruit, anything with high water content." Video footage released by the Interior Ministry showed the dilapidated sports hall overrun by the brown tortoises chomping on pieces of vegetables. The university had experience in caring for smuggled tortoises in 2016. 8 students had to feed over 8,000 of the reptiles in a similar situation. After paperwork was prepared and the tortoises were checked for parasites, they were transported in cardboard boxes and released in southern Kazakhstan. When we come back, Aid to Humanity donates thousands to Oakland local organizations on National Nonprofit Day and gives free school supplies to students. Eagle News will return in a moment. You're watching Eagle News. I'm Anna Kui. The Felix Y. Bonallo Foundation's Aid to Humanity U.S. Tour, sponsored by the Church of Christ, continues. Our Eagle News team takes us to Oakland, California, where local nonprofit organizations received thousands of dollars in donation. Students went home with free backpacks and school supplies, with residents given Goodwill bags filled with household items. Macy Membrere with the details.
Here in Oakland, California, on National Nonprofit Day, the Felix Y. Bonallo Foundation continues its 2019 Aid to Humanity National Tour by helping local organizations that are committed to helping others.
The city of Oakland is listed in the top 10 most dangerous cities in California, according to the independent review site Safewise, and has a homeless population which increased by 47% from 2017 to 2019, as reported by the SF Chronicle.
This community really needs a lot of help. A lot of people never had a chance around here. You know what I mean? They end up in all kind of different things.
The Felix Y. Bonallo Foundation gave backpacks, school supplies, and care packages containing non-perishable goods to residents of Oakland. It also gave checks to 10 nonprofit organizations within the community.
I know that a lot of people are struggling, and being a member of a church that doesn't think about just us, it is a beautiful experience. And being part of this today, helping out others, is beautiful. I'm very proud to be a member, and I'm very proud whenever I need to help out. So coming here today, it was amazing.
It's a great alignment that this is National Nonprofit Day. I know that the Felix Bonallo Foundation and the Church of Christ that partnered on this would have done this regardless of the actual day, and so I wouldn't say that it changes the impact of who they are, what they are bringing to the community, but it is a great sort of reminder and sort of acknowledgement that this is a broader mission, a broader goal by which we come together as people, as neighbors, to really, according to the title of this event, provide our aid to humanity.
Attendees share their thoughts about the Felix Y. Bonallo Foundation and the Church of Christ.
That has a very beautiful impact on the community. People, some people out here really didn't have stuff like this or backpacks. Some people, just live day to day. Some people don't have money to buy backpacks for their kids. Some people don't have food, you know what I'm saying, for their kids. You know, a lot of people go through a lot of things. So I guess today was a beautiful day for them to give back to help those people that didn't have really a lot of stuff today. Because some people didn't have money to buy kids their backpacks for school. They was like, you know, they pay their rent and then they, you know, be struggling. So actually, I think that's a blessing.
I grew up in the church, and it was ingrained in me from early on, to those who much is given, much is required. And that is exactly the philosophy, the values through which I live. And that is how we are going to be able to accomplish the immense challenges that we face as a society, is by folks who have resources and have been blessed, blessing others as a result.
The Felix Y. Manalo Foundation is a role model for other nonprofits and also churches that have got to reach out into the community to be of service, to live God's words around compassion and giving of yourself to others. And today is an incredible show of those values.
Those in attendance describe why the events of the day will have long-lasting effects on the community.
It was really beautiful, and I'm really thankful that you guys came by and did this. I just like the things that need to change around here, and you know, it takes this to do it, to show the people that people still care.
This is incredible for the community, not just because of the backpacks that were being given away, not just because the humanitarian, the giveaway bags, and not just because of the checks that we're giving to, I believe, 10 different nonprofit organizations that operate here in Oakland and provide a benefit to the community here. But it's a broader goal and mission that we have, and it continues to sort of spread. The momentum, the energy, the love, it has a multiplier effect, and I think that is an amazing part of what happened here today and why I'm glad to have been a part and express my appreciation.
Those values that we have as Oaklanders are so in line with the values of this church and this foundation to really look at helping those who are more vulnerable and to be of service and to join together to create a tremendous sense of community. By expressing love for your neighbor, by giving what little you have and sharing it with others, that act is like a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples will go forever. They will spread. The memory of that will live in this community. And for that reason, people will feel loved and taken care of. And that is a great gift.
This national tour of Aid to Humanity is part of a global effort to provide assistance to not only local communities, but to people all around the world. From Oakland, California, I'm Macy Membrari, 1 with 25.
What a generous way to celebrate National Nonprofit Day. Thanks, Macy. That is today's Eagle News. Join us tomorrow for the weekend edition. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Cui, and I am 1 with 25.